This is Ryan Fletcher, and we have a special guest today, Kevin Lee. We're going to talk about Canada, a musical mosaic. And Kevin has got an extensive background in music from various angles. And he's got a bachelor's of music from the UBC, a master's of music from the University of Western Ontario. He's been with the Vancouver Opera Chorus. He's been a member since 2011. 3 years experience teaching music, 10 plus years working with preschoolers and seniors, and routinely performs in the Lower Mainland. So we feel quite honored to have him here. And hello, Kevin.
Hello, thank you very much, Ryan. I'd like to welcome everyone to the third session with me, local opera singer and teacher Kevin Lee. Today we're talking about Canada, a multicultural music mosaic. Canada is a rich nation. We live on an expansive land that is wrapped in natural beauty, mineral wealth, and the necessities of life. However, perhaps the most beautiful part of Canada is the richness we have in culture. One significant musical culture is, what do you think it is, Ryan?
I think of the Maritimes a lot.
I would agree.
I
Maritimes.
think of fiddles and things like that.
Do you know another culture or another province in Canada that really utilized the fiddle as well?
Quebec.
Yeah, Quebec.
Canadian.
The Canadian, the Francophone culture.
Yeah.
They've been here the longest for the European cultures. Naturally, we have the Aborigine groups, which have been far longer than any other Europeans.
Yeah.
But during the time since they've landed, the Francophones, the French Canadians, have developed a sense of musical identity through their folk songs, instruments, and popular music. The first Francophone piece I have is a folk song called Vive le Canadien, or Long Live the Canadian. It tells the story of a Francophone man falling in love and marrying a Francophone woman and the celebration about it. I have a 1942 Victor recording of the group Quatuor Alouette. This group originated in 1930 with Roger Filetrol, Jules Jacon, Émilie Lemaire, and André Trottier. By 1931, they were starting to gain a lot of popularity in Quebec. And one unique thing about them, they were just dedicated to doing French folk songs. When you think nowadays, there's very few groups that are dedicated to just doing folk songs that are popular. Well, maybe Great Big Sea is perhaps the only one out in the Maritimes.
They've gotten away from that.
They have, but they started with that.
They started doing that. Yeah.
Well, anyways, it was quite something for that time because eventually their voices were heard outside of Quebec. They were heard in Ottawa, Toronto, and even on the radio in 1933. And next year, in 1934, they started to tour the eastern United States. But the most prestigious tour was for the 400th anniversary of the Foundation of Canada, where they represented Canada at the official ceremonies in Saint-Malo, France, and toured to Paris, Rouen, Le Havre, Dinard, and Brittany. And when you listen to this piece, it's an a cappella piece, so it kind of gives you the idea how it might actually been performed in the rural communities when they may not have had an instrument. Naturally, someone might have a fiddle or maybe an accordion, but I find this a really nice, realistic performance of how a folk song might have been performed back in the 1920s. As you listen to the piece, note the landmarks of folk songs. Folk songs is a very specific genre of music. They were made to be pieces to be shared in the community because it's folk songs, it's their songs.
Yeah.
So I want you to notice that in this recording, there's catchy tunes. It's a repetitive musical motif. And often enough, there'll be a little danceable idea to it, especially when you think about fiddle music. This one isn't fiddle, but it has some danceable ideas to it.
Well, Acadian is as well. Acadian's big on dance.
Absolutely. I think every culture has to be big on dance. There's something wrong with the culture when they don't allow dance. I don't mean footloose, but I just mean any culture. Anyways. And also the text is universal. The text of love, hardship, and hard work is very common for folk songs. So again, this is a story about a man falling in love with another Quebec girl and marrying each other and celebrating life. And again, this is Quatuor Alouette, recordings of Vive le Canadien, Long Live the Canadian.
Vive la Canadienne, vole mon cœur vole. Vive la Canadienne et ses jolis yeux doux, doux, doux. Et ses jolis yeux doux, 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 et ses jolis yeux doux. Et ses jolis yeux doux, 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 et ses jolis yeux doux, ses yeux doux. Nous l'amenons en noces, vole mon cœur vole. Nous l'amenons en noces, dans tous ses beaux atours. Nous l'amenons aux noces, vole mon cœur vole. Nous l'amenons aux noces, dans tous ses beaux atours. Dans tous ses beaux atours, dans tous ses beaux atours. Dans tous ses beaux atours, tour, tour, dans tous ses beaux atours, ses atours. On danse avec nos blondes, vole mon cœur vole. On danse avec nos blondes, nous changeons d'amour. On danse avec nos blondes, vole mon cœur vole. On danse avec nos blondes, nous changeons tour à tour, tour, tour. Nous changeons tour à tour, tour, tour. Nous changeons tour à tour. Nous changeons tour à tour, tour, tour. Nous changeons tour à tour, tour à tour. Ainsi le temps se passe, vole mon cœur vole. Ainsi le temps se passe, il est vraiment bien. Ainsi le temps se passe, vole mon cœur vole. Ainsi le temps se passe, il est vraiment bien doux, doux. Il est vraiment bien doux, doux, doux. Il est vraiment bien doux. Il est vraiment bien doux, doux, doux. Il est vraiment bien doux, oui, bien doux. Vive la Canadienne, vole mon cœur vole. Vive la Canadienne. Et ses jolis yeux doux.
Oh, that's really neat.
It is a really neat piece. And as you probably could have heard on that one, it was not only just repeated, like you did one verse, you repeat again, it was also done in almost sing and someone calls back way. You would have the tenor, he's doing the melody, and then the rest of the group joins in. Mm-hmm. And then when you think a lot about, when people are working out in the forest logging, or if they're even in the mines. I don't know. I don't know if they want to be singing mines though. I don't know if that would be safe. But in those occasions, you would have someone, doing singing, and then everyone responding. And
that's the origin of a lot of music.
It is absolutely
it's working
in the workplace. Absolutely, even in churches, you have people. The priest is or the minister who's doing the song at the start, and then the congregation responds to it. So it's a culture that goes way back. I could talk about how far back.
It helps you keep working. It's actually very useful in the work environment.
It does, because it makes time pass faster, and it also gives you a rhythm to your motions, especially when the motions are so repetitively redundant.
I just wanted to mention one thing I noticed that you had alluded to, but it was really interesting to hear it, is the dancing aspect.
Yeah.
I've never heard anything quite like that. They were there's a bit of a hop to it.
Yes, that's absolutely
into how
right.
the vocals were delivered. And so I've never quite heard vocals that were made to be danceable.
Yeah, and that it's and especially in this, the style is very much the French Canadian style. Yeah. In the next few pieces, we'll hear the influence of Irish folk songs, and there is most definitely a Irish dance quality to it. When we think of Irish dance, we think about people clicking their heels up and tapping their toes, literally. Like there's the Irish dance is a dance musical form that's based on rhythm. And the next piece is influenced by folk music of Quebec and Ireland. Quebecer Mary Rose Anne Travers, but also known as La Baudu, was born on June 4th, 1894 to an Irish-Canadian father and a French-Canadian mother. Despite no official training, she learned how to play traditional Quebec instruments being, what do you think they were? What do you think are Quebec? Some people don't even know of these instruments.
Yeah, I can't really think of what would be
We mentioned one earlier.
a fiddle.
The fiddle, yes.
Yeah.
The fiddle. And we think of France.
Well, that's what I'm trying to think
Yeah.
of. What would be a French even?
Well, let's think of a French singer, Edith Piaf. When you think of that style of music, what bellowing instrument might come to mind?
A bellowing
A
instrument?
bellowing instrument. It's
I
a
have no
bellowing.
idea.
Well, it's the accordion. The
Oh,
accordion
yes,
is a
of course,
very,
of
very
course.
French instrument, and they used in
Yes.
Quebec. And the nice thing, the accordion and fiddle, they're both portable. The
Yeah.
other three instruments that I'd like to mention are extremely portable. The harmonica, we all know that. The jaw harp. When you think of the jaw harp, it's
Bong, bong,
yeah, you go
bong,
bong bong
bong.
bong. I wish I had one because it would be a fun instrument.
I do have one of those.
Yeah. Well, and you probably have this one at home, but you may never actually use it. The spoons.
Yeah.
The spoons is a very, very, very French-Canadian instrument, and people might be thinking, how do you play the spoons? It's a rhythmic instrument. You get two spoons. You get the concave parts of the spoons to touch, and you hold it in your hand. It kind of sounds like a galloping type of thing, as if you've got like two coconuts or something beating against each other. But anyways, back to La Bourdieu. She was, despite no training, she was also able to memorize music from ear. And she became quite a successful composer of popular French-Canadian music. The unique mix of her Irish and French heritage was represented in her composition. This, combined with an upbeat tempo and comedic themes, made her very, very popular in 1930s, leading to her title as the Queen of Canadian folk singers. In the piece that we're about to listen to, Ça va venir de courage, or a rough translation is Times Are Going to Discourage. You hear in this French song Irish influences in the rhythmic and even melodic motifs. And the idea of this piece was to give lightness to the Great Depression. And I think that's one reason why she became so popular to the 1930s. They needed her. Her music was a form of, I don't necessarily want to say escape because she was addressing it, but it was lightening the reality at times or giving hope to a time when they really needed hope. Some of the lyrics in this piece are, "My friends, I assure you that time is hard. There's no need to discourage. It will soon begin. There is going to be work. For everyone this winter, we must give time for the new government." And then there's this refrain that comes in, and it's very catchy. When you hear it, you know what it is. It's going to come, but we won't be discouraged. I will always have a gay heart. I will continue the jigs. In other words, the jigs being these songs. And again, the jig, not really a French thing, I don't think. I think it's more of an Irish thing. So now we will listen to this wonderful piece of Le Bourdieu. You can understand when you listen to this why she became so popular during the Great Depression.
Mes amis, je vous assure que le temps est bien dur, il faut pas se décourager, ça va bien vite commencer, de l'ouvrage il va en avoir pour tout le monde cet hiver, il faut bien donner le temps au nouveau gouvernement, ça va venir puis ça va venir, mais de courage on n'eut pas, moi j'ai toujours le cœur gai et je continue à faire lutter, on se plaint à Montréal, après tout on est pas mal dans la province de Québec. On mange à notre pain sec, y a pas d'ouvrage au Canada, y en a bien moins dans les États. Essayez pas d'aller plus loin, vous êtes certains de crever de faim. Ça va venir puis ça va venir, mais de courage on n'eut pas. Moi j'ai toujours le cœur gai et je continue à faire lutter. cher de ce temps ici, pour se nourrir à que dit, faut pas que ça monte à la grossée. Je me tape fort sur les biscuits, mais je peux pas faire de l'extra. Mon petit mari travaille pas, à force de me priver de manger, je laisse ta mort tatiner. Ça va venir, puis ça va venir, mais de courage on n'eut pas. Moi je te joue le cœur gai, et je continue à faire lutter. De tam de tilly tom de tom, diddly tom de tom, da rom de tilly diddlum, da rom de tilly diddlum. Me voilà mal à manger, j'ai des trous dans m'essuyer. Mes talons sont tout travers, et puis le bout qui trousse en l'air. Le dessus est tout fendu, la doublure tout décousu. Les orteils passent à travers, c'est toujours mieux que pas n'avoir. Ça va venir, puis ça va venir, mais de courage on n'eut pas. Moi je te joue le cœur gai, et je continue à faire lutter. Des tam des tilly tam des tam dans les tilly, tarly tu ta pink de tilly tam des tam dans les tilly tilly. Le propriétaire qui m'a loué, il est bien mal à manger. Ma boîte à charbon est brûlée, et puis j'ai 5 vitres de casser. Ma lumière discollectée, puis mon eau est pas payée. Ils ont pas besoin de venir m'achaler, ma liste ça prend pas de l'escalier. Ça va venir, puis ça va venir, mais de courage on n'eut pas. Moi je te joue le cœur gai, et je continue à faire lutter.
And that was, again, Ça va venir décourager, or again, the rough translation, times are tough, but it's going to get better, so don't be discouraged. And, you know, it's quite something when you listen to this music, you can't help but smile, especially with this one. And it's so unique.
Yeah.
It sounds Irish, like you da 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 da.
I think I heard diddly dees.
Diddly dee. I know. It's so lighthearted, and in the backdrop of the Great Depression, and I think
it strikes me as being very Canadian too, because
exactly.
Where else would you hear an Irish jig sung in French?
Well, no, just in Quebecois.
Quebecois, yeah.
Like, you know, if you listen to someone from France, if they listen to this, they would not recognize it as their own. Even the language, it's different. But I think that's one of the wonderful things, and you know that's one of the very unique aspects of the French-Canadian influence. It isn't just French-Canadian. It's just not pure French-Canadian, because right beside French-Canada, you have the English-speaking and the Maritimers being the Irish, and then, you know, you go into Ontario, they have the Scottish influence, and they mix and mingled. And I think this is a great showing of the hybridization that is Canadian music. Mm-hmm. And we're actually going to go to some more hybridization. There was another composer and performer of the fusion French, Irish, Canadian folk music, Joseph Allard, was born in Woodland, Quebec in 1873. He grew up to be a fiddler and a composer of fiddle music. He began recording in 1928, and for the next 18 years, he made like around, I think actually it was a bit more than 75, 78 sized albums. He's actually one of the most successful of his instrument, of his style at that time. In this composition, his own composition, the Quadrille Français, notice the similarities of this piece to the last one. You still hear kind of that French influence, the Irish influence. It's very fun. It's very happy, and you know, it's something that's so unique to Canada. This distinct Irish, French, Canadian fusion sound that required nimbleness and light jauntiness. And you hear it in the last. You heard it in the last one, and you'll hear it again in this one. So without further delay, here's a piece. go. Again, that was Joseph Allard, and that was his Quadrille Français. Now, if you notice, why is this still a folk piece?
Well, the jig at the dance aspect.
Yeah.
But what I heard was fiddle, and it sounds like French accordion.
That's a good point. Yeah,
and that's a pretty unique thing.
Yeah, it's again.
And I can visualize when I listen to that, as you were saying in the beginning, people would travel.
Yes.
And it would actually only take two people to make that song happen.
Exactly.
And you could go
Absolutely.
anywhere, and you would create a good time.
You would create a good time. It's a memorable piece. People would go away humming it or singing it.
Yeah.
Also, as you said, it's a dancing piece, and people would, whether it be a barn or out in the field or somewhere in the workplace where there's enough space, they know the dance tune. So they know the dance tune, they know it's going to repeat. And it's only until the end when they might speed it up, do it quicker at the end, and people know, like, oh, it's going to end, so we have to really celebrate right now. Or they also might do a certain type of rhythmic motive that people would just know that it's going to end right now, and then then we go on to the next song. So in that sense, it's a folk song that people are coming together in a work environment with the same ideas of repetitiveness and, I guess, memorability. Now, I would like to conclude the French Canadian section with it's out of the time period that I was supposed to be talking about, but it's such a beautiful, captivating piece by songstress Germaine Dugas. I just recently discovered her, and I like to call her the Edith Piaf of Canada. Her voice is so beautiful, and this piece is so doux, or in English, sweet. It's incredibly sweet. Even though this piece comes from 1950, it parallels the same ideals of the folk song. It has a highly repetitive melody, and it's a dance rhythm, but unlike before where it's the jig and these upbeats, it's a nice waltz. It's a very nice waltz.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's the waltz quality and her voice that makes it so doux, so sweet. The text is about young love. Again, another universal theme. The purity of it, the innocence, and even naivety about it. When then she contrasts young love to the view of this young love to someone who's older and wiser, and how looking at young love is somewhat lost on these individuals because they will remark about how foolish it is to live in this beautiful world. But at the same time, the wise people recognize that it is wonderful to live in this world, and even if they might look at it and want to be a part of it, they can't really. Let me read you the text in English, because I understand that probably most of the listeners aren't francophone, so I just like to do a rough translation. Two children the same age, not very wise children, have left this morning holding hands. Without worry about anything, these children are the same age. These children, if not wise, go searching in the distance by streets, paths, the country, where they come back. And of course, in searching in the distance means go off the journey in love. Of great wisdom, those who are not these children's age, jealous of their own fate or their own reality, despise their own grief, follows these children with clever eyes because they are wise, who were not these children's age, have already gone off, searching paths in this country, but in vain. Beware of wise people who are not your age, or in this case, your young age. They always try to show you one day their path of love, the ones that aren't too wise. To understand that at your age, it is in your hearts, through your heart's sighs, exists this land of happiness. These children, not very wise, have just their age. We leave tomorrow, taking us by the hand, without worry about anything. You who are of the young age, you do not need to become wise. Go searching alone by the streets, roads, and this country to never return. In other words, just keep on going forward in love. And it's so beautiful. And without further delay, here's the captivating, enchanting Deux enfants du même by Germaine Dugas.
enfants du même âge, deux enfants pas très sages, sont partis ce matin, se tenant par la main sans se soucier de rien. Ces enfants du même âge, ces enfants si peu sages, s'en vont chercher au loin par les rues, les chemins, le pays d'où l'on revient. Des grands beaucoup trop sages, qui n'avaient pas leur âge, jaloux de leur destin, méprisant leur chagrin, les suivirent l'œil malin. Car ces grands toujours sages, qui n'avaient plus leur âge, déjà partirent au loin chercher par les chemins ce pays, mais enfin, deux enfants du même âge, deux enfants pas très sages, sont partis ce matin, se tenant par la main sans se soucier de rien. Ces enfants du même âge, ces enfants si peu sages, s'en vont chercher au loin par les rues, les chemins, le pays d'où l'on revient. Méfiez-vous des gens sages, ceux qui n'ont pas votre âge. Ils essaieront toujours de vous montrer un jour leur chemin de l'amour. Ils sont maintenant trop sages pour comprendre qu'à votre âge, il existe dans vos cœurs, dans toute sa grandeur, ce pays du bonheur. Ces enfants pas très sages ont tout juste notre âge. Nous partirons demain, nous tenant par la main sans nous soucier de rien. Vous qui avez notre âge, ne devenez pas trop sages. Allez chercher au loin par les rues, les chemins, ce pays d'où l'on ne revient jamais.
I think we can all agree that piece is very, very, very French, the whole style of it. When you listen to it, you almost have the feeling that there's a smoky quality in the air. It's almost the jazz feeling, but not quite jazz. It's still rooted in, the French-Canadian style of telling a story.
The music seems to be really based around the lyric.
Absolutely.
And to me, that's more of a folk type of style.
Yeah, very true, very true. And, again, it's the idea of the waltz being one of the most romantic and pure. There's different types of romanticism. You can just talk about tango on how romantic it is, but it's almost an aggressive, angsty romance. But the waltz is such a pure, sweet dance, and the quality of her voice, the quality of this piece, the song, and
it's a very beautiful song.
Is wonderful. But unfortunately, that concludes the French-Canadian aspect. So we're going to go to another province in Canada that, well, maybe not province, but collection of provinces that really use the fiddle music. Which area of Canada do you think I'm talking about?
Well, if it's a collection of provinces, I would be thinking the Maritime provinces.
That is right. That's absolutely right. When we think of fiddling, we probably think of the Maritimes first. Absolutely. One fiddler from the Maritimes was able to captivate Canada and beyond. This was Don Messer. Born in Tweedside, New Brunswick, Messer was surrounded by Irish and Scottish music. Picking up the violin at the age of 5, he would go on to play throughout New Brunswick. In 1929, he actually began a radio career, and by 1934, he had a regular radio show with the Canadian Radio Broadcast Commission, which was the forerunner to the CBC of today. Now, here is his Blue Mountain Rag. Imagine yourself at a summer barn dance party. The night air is fresh, and after a hard week of work and maybe a few too many drinks, you want to grab your gal and hit the floor.
Yeah.
But when you listen to that, you notice that that's the maritime sound. It is different from the French Canadian music. I think the best way to put it is when you think of the difference in language. When we speak English here, and when we speak English, we have a clear stop and start. We really accentuate certain words. I'm not saying that the French don't do that, but the French language is very fluid, very smooth. You know, if I was going to speak in French, bonjour, je m'appelle Kevin, j'ai étudié à l'université de British Columbia et à l'UWO pour chanson. It's very, very smooth.
Yeah.
And for this one, like when you think of the last,
Got more
verse,
hard.
it
spots.
really comes down on the downbeats. You really
Yeah.
hear those downbeats a lot clearer.
Yeah.
And you know, with dance music, that's generally how I like dance music. If I'm going ballroom dancing, I like hearing that clear downbeat because I know what to be where then.
Yeah.
But when you think of the last piece, and even some pieces before, the Germaine Dugas, it was so smooth. And it was a waltz, but the downbeat wasn't really sensed. It was just kept on flowing. Nothing was particularly accented over anything else. And even when you think about some of the fiddle music we heard before this one from French Canada, the accent wasn't as strong. It almost had a kind of as you were going down a river feeling. And this one was, I don't know, very much the jamboree, in my opinion. That's just my opinion, though.
I wanted to clarify. Is that the spoons I heard in that song?
If
Do you think that might be?
If they were the spoons, they were wooden spoons.
Yeah.
It could have been. If they were spoons, it was wooden spoons. It wasn't that metallic quality, but it was more of a wooden quality. But it's very
think that
possible
might
it
have
could.
been, yeah.
It could have been the spoons. I encourage everyone to go and find out how to play the spoons because it's actually a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Once you learn how to play it. Okay. The next piece I would like to cover is actually a folk song. For some reason, unfortunately, it was hard for me to find recordings of maritime folk songs from the early 1900s. And I think one reason for that is the recording studios were in Toronto and Montreal. Nothing in the Maritimes, nothing out west as well. So really, what access did they have? But luckily, they have some phenomenal songs. There's something, you know, when we think Maritimes, we think of the music and we often think of their humor. There's a very unique humor to the Maritimes, and it shows in this piece. The piece is called The Kelly Grew Soiree. It's a great example of this folk music and humor. It was written by John Burke, St. John band leader, or balladeer, I should say. And actually, the Kelly Grew Soiree, it is actually a soiree that's held in Kelly Grews. It's a real event. So despite having no recording of it, I will sing 2 of the 6 verses from you. I'll just make sure I'm far enough away from the mic so I don't make anyone go deaf. Okay, these are 2 of the 6 verses. You may talk of Clare, novels, ball, or anything you choose, but it couldn't hold a snugstle to the spree of Kelly Grews. If you want your eyeballs straight, and just come out the next week with me, and you'll have to wear your glasses to the Kelly Grewsery. There was birch wine, tart wine, cherry wine, and turpentine, jaws and carol ansids, ginger beer and tea. Pig's feet, cat's meat, dumplings boiled in a sheet, dandelions, a cracky's teeth at the Kelly Grewsery. Crooked Flavin struck the fiddler, and the hand I then took in. You should see George Clooney's beaver, and it flattened to the rim. And Hogan's coat was like a vest, the tail was gone, you see. On says I, the devil Holly at the Kelly Grewsery. There was birch wine, tart wine, cherry wine, and turpentine, jaws and carol ansids, ginger beer and tea. Pig's feet, cat's meat, dumplings boiled in a sheet, dandelion, a cracky teeth at Kelly Grewsery. There we go.
Nice work on the accent.
Thank you. I try. Well, you know, you have to make it authentic, and that's one thing I love about Canada. We are, in my opinion, the biggest nation of culture, and a lot of us speak English, but depending where you are in the country, it will be a different form of English, and it's wonderful. Okay, well, we're gonna head to another Canadian from the Maritimes who hit it big, and that was Henry Burr. I don't know how many people know about him, but it was quite popular for his time. He was born in January 1882. He was a tenor who sung popular songs. For those who heard my previous radio broadcast, it was regarding recording and the record. And if you listen to it, you might remember the significance to classically trained tenor voices for the early acoustic recordings. The unique and fortunate thing about tenors' voices during that time was it fit perfectly within the tonal frequency range that those early recording devices could pick up. And when you think about opera arias or even some early songs, often enough it will be a tenor's voice that comes in, and that's because of that very reason. They were able to cash in on the tenor voice because the sound quality was so much better for the tenor. There wasn't as much static. The voice wouldn't suddenly disappear after singing above or below certain notes. So, and Henry Burr, he reaped the benefits of it. He was one of the first popular singers during the acoustic recording era to make over 12,000 recordings.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a lot for that time, especially for that time.
Well, anytime.
I suppose for any time. Nowadays it's a bit easier since we could all make recordings at our home with our own computer. However, once electric recording came in, because the electric recording was so much better, it could pick up a lot more frequencies, and the sound quality was exponentially better. The music popularity shifted towards crooners such as the Frank Sinatras, that type of style. But still, Henry Burr still existed in the entertainment industry as a radio producer. The piece that I have of him singing is When You and I Were Young, Maggie. Now, originally, this piece was thought to be an American poem, but it's actually written by a Hamilton, Ontario schoolteacher who fell in love with Maggie Clark. Unfortunately, the year after they married, in 1864, Maggie fell ill and died. So this poem and now song is actually written in memory of Maggie. Now, without further ado, the early Canadian love song, When You and I Were Young, Maggie.
I wandered today to the hill, Maggie, to watch the scene below. The creek and the creaking old mill, Maggie, as we used to long, long ago. The green grove is gone from the hill, Maggie, where first the daisies sprung. The creaking old mill is still, Maggie, since you and I were young. They say I am feeble with age, Maggie. My steps are less sprightly than then. My face is a well-written page, Maggie, but time alone was the pen. And now we are aged and gray, Maggie, and
So, out of curiosity, would you think that would be classified as a folk song?
Yeah. Yeah.
For which reasons?
Just that the style of the verses, the story style. It makes me think of Paul Robeson, actually.
Really?
Of the
Oh,
way
interesting.
the vocal was done.
Yeah.
And, you know, a love story.
Yeah,
that
I would
sort of
also
thing.
love.
Yeah.
I would cross it with folk and barbershop, in a sense.
Yeah,
You know, it's
definitely the barbershop,
Yeah.
The background.
the background.
was-
But as you listen to it, you still notice that you hear the tenors. There's Henry Burr and another person, a back singer, who's also a tenor, and you hear them so clearly. You know that there's a bass
I
as
could,
well.
I could definitely pick that out.
Yeah, but again, it's this is acoustic recording,
Yeah.
and although I suppose this isn't necessarily reflected upon Canadian music, it's most definitely a Canadian singer and Canadian text, Canadian poetry. But I really wanted to bring this out just to remind everyone about the unique time in recording. Again, it was limited. It was so limited of what you could do before we had this explosion in the late 1920s with electronic recording. So I just wanted to have that as a little brief side note. Now we're going to come westward. After spending all this time out east, we're going to come to Mr. Wilf Carter. Although he was born in Port Hilford, Nova Scotia, he is associated with Alberta. He left home at the age of 15, and Carter would travel throughout Canada working in logging camps and singing with hobos in box carts until he came to Calgary, where he became a cowboy. Well, being a cowboy seemed to work out very well for him and his voice. He became a yodeling cowboy. Yodeling isn't just reserved for the Alps, it's also a Canadian thing. His first radio performance was on CFCN in 1930, and he would start performing in 1935 in New York on the radio and would have his own radio show with CBS in 1937. Now, the piece I've chosen is called 32 Wonderful Years. It tells about his journey from Nova Scotia to Alberta and finally the success he has had as a performer by the age of 32. Now, without further ado, our country cowboy yodeler, Mr. Wilf Carter.
You know, this is the greatest thrill of my life, to be able to sit down here and make this album of my 32 wonderful years. When I left my eastern home in the search of a wealth and a fame, I rode boxcars from the east to the west, sleeping in the cold and the rain. I'm a-sitting by the old corral neath the dreamy prairie moon, soon I headed out for the old barn dance to sing my yodeling tune. 32 wonderful years, my friends, 32 wonderful years. I've no regrets, many thanks to you all for the 32 wonderful years. Hey, hey, 32 wonderful years. My little yo-ho-le-yo and my golden Larian. The echoing hills yodel back to me, memories I just can't forget. Yes, I remember the rodeo, the Calgary Roundup too. Old Dynamite Trail and the Strawberry Roan can make any cowboy blue. 32 wonderful years, my friends, 32 wonderful years. I've no regrets, many thanks to you all for the 32 wonderful years. When it's twilight on the prairie, hear my lonely cattle call. I'll see my little gray-haired mother when the work's all done this fall. There's a bluebird on your windowsill, all the memories never die. There's a love knot in my lariat, Swiss moonlight lullaby. 32 wonderful years, my friends, 32 wonderful years. I've no regrets, many thanks to you all for the 32 wonderful years. Hey, hey, 32 wonderful years. My blue Canadian Rockies, my old Canadian home. My beautiful girl on the prairie, oh, why did I ever roam? I've hung my chaps and saddle, to some it may seem strange. Alberta, I'm headed homeward, Calgary, my home on the range. 32 wonderful years. I've no regrets, many thanks to you all for the 32 wonderful years. Hey, hey, 32 wonderful years. Ho, ho. Hey, hey, man.
Yeehaw. And again, that was Wilf Carter with 32 wonderful years. Now, when you listen to that, it's very different from what we've heard from the Maritimes and from Quebec. I don't want to necessarily say that's the Alberta style, just because I actually couldn't find that much music from people from Alberta. And again, that's part because there's the only two recording studios was in Toronto and Montreal. So I'm a bit hesitant to say, saying that's a great example of what the Alberta cowboy sound is. But one unique thing about this type of music, country music, is most definitely based in folk song, and it's one of the folk songs that actually has lasted till today. There's still a huge country music community. It's changed a little, or maybe a lot.
It's changed a lot.
It's changed a lot, but it still exists as a
like
genre.
Johnny Cash or
Ooh.
back there, that's definitely hybrid with folk.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It's there's now country artists like that is much more rare.
Yeah, absolutely. I would like to also. I'm not touching upon Ontario, and that's because the first presentation I gave here at BVM Radio covered two conductors of music, and they both came from Ontario. So if there is anyone who would like to hear music from Ontario, some of that being some of the influences of folk music, I would encourage them to listen to the first recording that I did here at BVM Radio. Before I end, I would like to touch upon some other aspects. There are cultures that have been overlooked, most definitely, through Canadian music history, one of them being Aboriginal groups, I should actually say, I apologize. There was some effort being made back in the 1920s, 1930s, I believe, with Mr. Sir Ernest Macmillan before he became knighted, and he was working with, I guess a best way would say, music/cultural scholar who was interested in Native music. And they went around, more so the western coast here in BC, finding individuals to record Native folk music, or I'm not sure if that's the correct term, but Native Canadian music of this area. Unfortunately, I couldn't find any recordings of that. I wish I could. If I can, people can go on my website. I will put it on. My website is www.musc.ca, that www.musc.ca, that's music with a twist. But before I end, I would like to touch upon some other music that defines Canada. Canada isn't just, during that time, French, Irish, Scottish, and Alberta. There was also other influences, Germanic, Russian, even some sense of some Spanish influence as well. The next piece I have is actually from the Russian Imperial Art Quartet from Russia. However, this was recorded in Montreal back in 1924. So keep in mind that this is a Russian group. It's authentically Russian, but also remember that it's 1924. The quality won't be that great. But nonetheless, here is the folk song, the Song of the Volga Boatmen. Okay, and that is, again, the Song of the Volga Boatman. Now, this is a folk song, but I would say this is extremely different from the other folk songs we listen to. It touches upon a similar theme. It's a theme of hardship. These are Volga boatmen. They're
Certainly
hauling
a work song.
most definitely a word song, but not a dancing song.
Not at all, no.
And that was kind of like one of the ideas, one of the stereotypes that was put on the Russians, like very hard-working people,
Yeah.
all work and no play, so forth.
It's got like a plodding quality.
A very well.
Dun, dun,
It,
dun.
what I like to think,
Dun,
it's
dun, dun,
they're pulling the
dun.
boats and
Yeah.
their feet are getting stuck in the mud as they're pulling their boats
Yeah.
back to shore, and like they're already tired. So
Yeah.
it's almost like, you have to get the whip cracking on
You
them.
can kind of feel the work when you.
I'm sweating already.
Yeah.
Well, I think I'll just do one more quick piece. It's called The Russian Rag. And unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, it's a fun piece, but unfortunately, a lot, when you have so-called Russian or Chinese or these exotic influences put into popular music, they're actually not from Russia or from China or from Japan. They're more of a stereotype interpretation about how their music sounds. So I want you, the listeners, to listen to their music and try to figure out which quality is supposed to be this Russian stereotype. Again, the Russian rag. And there we go. Again, that is The Russian Rag, and that was performed by Joseph's Kampsens Waldorf Estonian Dance Orchestra, and it was recorded in 1920 in Montreal, Quebec. Now, do you think, did that, what aspect of that sounded Russian to you?
The way, I don't know how to put it in musical terms, but the way it began, the dun,
Yeah,
dun,
da, da. It's very stringent, and that was
Yeah.
kind of like the stereotype of Russia at the time. That wasn't an actual Russian motif based
Yeah.
on anything. The Russian
how it would have been portrayed
Yeah, it
probably
would
in
portray-
the news
yeah.
around the war.
Yeah,
that sort of thing.
it kind of reminds me of if Lennon was to do the Charleston, that's the type of music he
Yeah.
would do it to.
Yeah.
Really, that's more or less it. And that's the reality of that time. They weren't being authentic to the culture, but it was of a stereotype of that culture, and existed for Russia, for China, for a lot of Asia and Africa and Latin America as well.
Oh yeah, I can imagine so.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for having me here at BVM Radio.